We all know who this is. It's Thomas Tank Engine, easily the most well-known train character across all of fiction. He is miles above the likes of Casey Jr., Wilson, Little Engine I Could, etc. Thomas himself is a unique character, as his origins in the Thomas universe is pretty vague and broad. The general statement is that he wound up on Sodor in 1915 during the war efforts and wound up helping build the Northwestern Railway. There's not much else really stating otherwise, and the fandom at large is full of unique headcanons and AUs that give him a more concrete origin. Interesting part of Thomas' official backstory is that he is never shown or even documented missing any of his potential siblings. In the Railway series, the other E2s are never mentioned. In the TV series, nothing much either, as Thomas' basis is a little more vague given his differences in design. And then for my AU, known as the Porterverse, Thomas is a tank engine of Sudrian origin, and all of his siblings worked on Sodor with him in the early days. In this video, we'll explain what happened to all of them. Disclaimer before we continue, this video is purely headcanon information, not official at all, just a little heads up there. This is all just my little personal AU. Anyways, without further ado, let's jump right in. It all began on Sodor. In 1895, the Knapford and Ulfstead Railway opened its doors to the public and began services. The railway opened with the fleet of 040 coffee pot engines that were a little on the older side of age. One of these was named Glynn, for those wondering. The Knapford and Ulfstead route was pretty long. However, there was also much of an issue as any very few long-distance trains across the entire main line would just need two engines to double head or push-pull the train up. Nothing much was really done regarding this, as for the first few years of the railway's existence, the main passenger service only ran twice a week. Mostly because the railway was like 80% industrial and didn't rely so much on its passenger services. Like all things, however, things changed over time. By 1909, the demand for passenger services eclipsed the demand for goods trains for the first time, and the coffee pot engines, which were wearing themselves out and were coming out of date, new engines were to be needed. The railway's engine works at Farquhar whipped up a new class of tank engine that will replace the aging coffee pots. This tank engine class used the 060 configuration, had extended side tanks, which would be later copied by the LBSER E2s, and were designed for mixed traffic services and shunting. In 1910, the batch of these new R46 class of tank engines entered service, and the first engine of this class was named Thomas. The new R46s will be a class of 4 tank engines. They were numbered as follows: Number 1, Thomas, Number 2, Bluebell, Number 3, Estelle, and Number 4, Leroy. Thomas and Bluebell were assigned to passenger work, while Estelle and Leroy were the goods engines of the railway. Things were relatively the same after this, but following a quick merger with the Sodor Tramway in 1912, the railway became the Knapford, Arlesborough, and Ulfstead Railway, or simply referred to as the KA&UR. There were only 4 of this R46 class up until this point, but by 1913, a new member of the class entered service, and was classified as the R46B, and this engine was none other than Crazy Bartholomew. Bartholomew was basically the half-brother of the R46s. He was identical in outline, but some differences included having a sturdier frames, solid disc drive wheels, larger buffer beams, and larger buffers. Bartholomew is painted a solid yellow with blue wheels. I've gone over Bartholomew and also Cranky a bit in the Bartholomew solo video, so feel free to check that out if you're interested. The main 4 R46s would dominate rail services along Sodor's west coast, and they will continue services the existence of the Teignmouth, Wellsworth, and Brenham Light Railway, and well into the grouping era. Speaking of which, the grouping of railways across the United Kingdom saw a lot of changes. In terms of the railways on Sodor, the TWBLR and the S&M would merge into one, becoming the Northwestern Railway. And with that, more engines would arrive and everything will be shuffled around. By 1925, Thomas was the only R46 still working on his old stopping grounds on what is now the Farquhar branch line. and his siblings were assigned elsewhere. Bluebell would become a shunter at Crosby Station, while Estelle and Leroy became utility engines. Things would stay relatively the same throughout the grouping era. By the end of 1948, things began to change. British Railways was fully into existence by 1948, and all Sodor engines were painted into BR colors. Business would continue as usual until 1949, when the first transfers were happening. Estelle and Leroy were moved to the London Midland region of BR. Following an emotional goodbye, the two left Sodor for the final time. Things were mundane for the next few years. Thomas and Bluebell continued as usual, while Estelle and Leroy were continuing the London Midland region, often having the crew write letters to Sodor. In 1952, Estelle was given an overhaul. Her cab was replaced with the standard Ginty one, or just general Ginty outline, and she was also given a Giesel ejector funnel. By 1954, Estelle and Leroy were transferred again, but they ended up being separated. Estelle went to the Western region, while Leroy went to the Eastern region. While in the Western region, Estelle would meet the one and only Oliver working on the same line. The two engines would become friends, and this is where Oliver would first learn of Sodor's status as being somewhat of a steam engine safe haven. By 1962, things got very weird. Estelle had a serious accident that year, and was out of service for a long time. It was reported that Estelle had required a full overhaul to return to service. After a couple years of basically no updates, Oliver began to worry a bit for his friend. When Oliver went into the works for maintenance in 1966, he wondered about Estelle even more, and so he asked his crew to do some digging one night, and they found out that British Railways had been lying to them. Oliver and his crew found out that Estelle was never overhauled at all. She was actually scrapped by British Railways in secret. They'd also discovered that her brother Leroy was scrapped in 1954 as well. Oliver was devastated by this, and it was likely that Estelle began questioning the whereabouts of her brother and was silenced by BR. Following this revelation, Oliver plans to escape to Sodor to ensure both his own survival and the eventual downfall of British Railways. Oliver will make the journey over to Sodor in the span of 4 months in secret. Oliver, Toad, and crew would eventually make it to Sodor by March of 1967. When he finally reached Sudrian soil, Oliver revealed the whole truth about Estelle, Leroy, and British Railways' plans to scrap all steam engines on the mainland. As you can imagine, Thomas, Bluebell, and Bartholomew were absolutely outraged by this the most, and they were very vocal in the erupting protests across Sodor and the mainland. The whole scandal didn't do much to really solve the problem, but by the summer of 1958, steam was done for on British Railways. But Sodor's railways were to be untouched, and they were made independent once again. The dust had finally settled by the 1970s. In present day, Thomas, Bluebell, and Bartholomew are the 3 preserved R46s. They all keep in touch and try to meet up in person from time to time to catch up on events. In the end, all 3 engines still live on Sodor and are living their best lives. So that was the history of Thomas's siblings. It was honestly really fun to go over this topic. I don't think I've seen a lot of people cover this before. Someone probably has by now, but who knows. Before the video ends, I would like to use this time to ask a quick question of y'all. I've been looking to branch out a little bit for my content. I've been getting on the Transformers lately, and I'm also a big fan of other topics as well, like anime, Star Wars, all that fun stuff. I was wondering, what would you like to see from me outside of the Thomas and Train stuff? Let me know what y'all want to see in the comments below. I am open to ideas. Thank you all very much for watching, and I shall see you all same time next week.